Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Have you ever sat there just staring at your screen after you typed in a web address?
And thinking like, how does it even
How does it even work?
Yeah.
It's magic, right? Like all that stuff just pops up.
Like a whole world appears.
How does it get there? It's crazy. So today we're going to try and figure out how web pages actually like work. How they go from just code, words and letters and symbols into the visual stuff that we actually see and click on and scroll through and everything.
It is wild, and I think we've got some pretty cool sources to help us unpack it all. We've got some excerpts from a technical document on how HTML gets parsed, plus some really helpful visuals.
Yeah, so we can really see it in action. So get
Yeah,
ready to have your mind blown, folks, because after today, you might never look at your web browser the same way again.
absolutely.
Okay, so first things first, when you type in a web address, our sources are saying the browser starts by grabbing files from the server, right?
Yeah, it fetches all that HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that makes up the website.
Right, but what's really interesting is that it doesn't like wait for everything to download before it starts working.
Exactly. The browser is super efficient. It starts processing those files right away, even while the rest are still coming in. Like, if you have a big image or a video, it'll start working on the text and layout first so you can see something happening right away.
Right. Optimization, baby.
Exactly. The faster the page loads, even partially, the better the experience for the user. I mean, no one wants to stare at a blank screen for ages, right?
Exactly. So, okay, so the browser's grabbing the code. What happens next? How does it take all those words and symbols and make sense of them?
Well, the browser starts breaking the code down into smaller, meaningful chunks. They're called tokens. It's like taking a sentence and separating it into individual words so you can understand the meaning, right? So imagine the browser's doing the same thing, but with HTML tags and attributes.
Ah, so it's like translating from code language to browser language.
Exactly. And once the browser gets all those little pieces figured out, it organizes them into this tree-like structure called the document object model.
The DOM. We've heard that one before.
Right. It's like a family tree for all the elements of the web page, headings, paragraphs, images, everything. Each piece of content is a branch.
Okay, I'm picturing it. So we've got the content all organized, but what about the way the website looks?
Yeah.
The colors, the fonts, the layout, all that jazz.
That's where the CSS comes in. It's like the stylus for the web page. The browser builds something called the CSS object model.
The CSS own. Right.
Yeah, and it uses that to figure out how everything should be presented visually. Like, is the text centered? What font are we using? What color is the background? All that stuff.
I remember our source had a really clear example. They said, imagine a paragraph element centered on the page. That centering, that's the CSS of an action.
Right. It tells the browser, hey, make this text align in the middle. It's all about instructions.
Okay, I think we're starting to get the hang of this. But wait, what about JavaScript? Where did that fit in?
Ah, JavaScript.
Yeah.
That's where things get even more dynamic and sometimes a little bit tricky. Because JavaScript can add all sorts of interactivity to a website, but it can also sometimes slow things down if it's not handled carefully.
Right, because it can be a lot of code sometimes.
Yeah. And sometimes the browser will actually pause its work on the HTML and CSS to deal with the JavaScript first. It's kind of like prioritizing the task. Like, you wouldn't want a fancy animation to slow down the main content of the page loading, right?
Makes sense. Got to make sure the core stuff gets there first.
Absolutely. So the browser often prioritizes things that are immediately visible to the user. And then you have these techniques like defer and async loading, which are like special instructions for JavaScript. They tell the browser, hey, you can load this in the background. It doesn't need to block everything else.
That's pretty clever.
All right.
So, okay, we've got the DOM, we've got the CSM, and we've got JavaScript possibly doing its thing in the background. How does the browser pull all of this together and actually, put it on the screen for us to see? It's got to be like a grand finale, right?
It is, and that's where the render tree comes in. It's like the ultimate blueprint. It takes the structure from the DOM, combines it with the styling info from the CSM, and voila, that's what you see.
So it's like the DOM is the skeleton,
Yeah.
the CSM is the close, and the render tree is the final look.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. But it's not over yet. There's this important step called reflow, where the browser actually calculates where each element should be placed on the page. Considering your browser window size, the size of each element, all the CSS rules, it's like solving a giant puzzle.
Whoa, so it's like every time you resize your browser window, it's got to recalculate all that stuff.
Pretty much. And once reflow is done, it's time for painting. That's where all the visual details get added in, the colors, images, borders, everything.
So it's like it's putting on the makeup now.
Exactly. And get this, modern browsers have gotten even smarter. They use a technique called composition. They basically break the UI into smaller parts and update them independently. It's kind of like a video game rendering a complex scene. It makes everything smoother and faster.
Wow. So much is going on behind the scenes.
It really is remarkable when you think about it.
It's like a whole hidden world, and it all happens in a blink of an eye. It's kind of mind-blowing when you realize how much intricate work goes into just displaying a simple web page.
Yeah, it's like a carefully choreographed dance of code, data, and rendering magic. We take it for granted, but it's pretty amazing.
It is. And to think, developers are constantly optimizing this process, making sure websites load as quickly and smoothly as possible.
Yeah, they're always pushing the boundaries of what's possible. It's super cool.
So, yeah, the next time you open up a website, try to remember this hidden journey, the journey that brought that page to your screen. But here's something I was thinking about. You know how we talked about JavaScript sometimes slowing things down? Like, how do you think this whole process might change for websites that are super complex, with tons of animations and interactive elements? It's got to be even more intricate, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about those websites that feel like an app, with all those moving parts and real-time updates. It's a whole other level of complexity.
Right. It's mind-boggling. But that's something to ponder, right? Maybe we can deep dive into that another time. But for now, thanks for joining us on this journey into the heart of the web. We'll catch you next time.
See ya!
Bye-bye.